Are the Falcons going to pull a wild card on us on draft night? Let's talk about if they were to go down the Michael Penix route again and blindside everyone, what that could look like, and more importantly, who that pick would be. So let's start by laying the kind of ground rules here. I could only see the Falcons getting to a Michael Penix shocking type pick if all four of these players are taken before pick number 15, and Atlanta has to make a decision. Do they take edge no matter what, or do they go with their board, go with their best player available, even if it's not at one of the biggest positions of need? So if Mike Green goes to the Bears, Shamir Stewart to the Saints, we'll say at 9, Jalen Walker is a Panther, and Will Johnson goes to Miami, does the Falcons contingency decide, hey, we're not going to just force defensive end no matter what. We're going to go with the best player available, which we would have hoped would have been one of these guys because they've been kind of rumored to link to all four of these players. But since they're gone, we're going to have to call an audible here and go with someone like Malakai Starks. So that's my first of 5. Let's lump the next one into it as well. Another safety, Nick Emmanwori. So a couple of SEC players that have generated a lot of buzz for the Falcons in the pre-draft process. Let me give you a quick breakdown on each one, and then we'll talk more about how it could turn into a Michael Penix blindside type pick. So Starks for a second here. First thing you got to know about him is I think he is like the Roquan Smith, or I think he was like the Roquan Smith of that Georgia defense when it came to making sure everyone was where they needed to be. Usually you get that out of your middle linebacker. Starks, since day one on campus, was a huge piece of this defense and a huge piece of that locker room. He started the last 42 straight games, which shows a ton of durability, and the best ability is availability. So that's a huge pro he's got going for him. Size and athlete-wise, he's not average. He's above average, but he's not one of the greatest athletes we've seen. 6 foot, 200 pounds, 4.5 40-yard dash. I'm not going to try and pass him off as like a generational type athlete that you're just going to take him because of his size, speed, and strength, and you figure out the rest later. No, I could argue that him as a player is actually more impressive than him as a track star. And oftentimes some teams get too zeroed in on the track star and not the actual player with the pads on. Last year for UGA, he had 1 interception, 4 tackles for loss, but you look over his 3-year career down in Athens, and he's always had a nose for the football, 6 interceptions, 23 pass breakups. In coverage, he was pretty stout for UGA as well, giving up 453 yards, but that sounds like a bad number. It's important to recognize that they used Starks all over that defense. They lined him up at that star nickel position, which is very coveted and highly valuable. And when you're at the line of scrimmage sometimes and you're deep in coverage other times, you can often get blamed for a lot of yards being allowed because it was in your, sphere. But it's not fair when your sphere is constantly moving and PFF just goes, all right, well, he was in that neck of the woods, so we'll attribute the yardage to him. So I love the durability, but I also love the versatility, especially with the way that the modern NFL offense matures, which is more 3 wide receiver sets, heavy pass front looks, and things like that. Defenses have to match that, which means you got to have not just 2 good outside corners, but you got to have a good nickel corner as well. I think Starks is probably going to be a true free safety at the next level, but if you need him to step down to the line of scrimmage in a pinch, that's not foreign water for him. So I like this a lot for Atlanta when it comes to the player, but this all comes with the caveat of, is it going to be a best player available pick or a what we need most? And you hope that those 2 circles create a nice Venn diagram and it's best player available at your biggest position of need. But we have seen that the Falcons do not mind just going off their board and figuring out the rest later. So keep that in mind. All right, Nick Emmanwori. That was the other safety I want to talk about here. I know I'm getting a little bit long-winded, but come on, the draft is 8 days from now. This is the time to really zero in. So some background on Emmanwori. The USC safety is not like Malakai Starks from a profile standpoint. He is 6'3", 220 pounds. He is more reminiscent of a smaller linebacker than your traditional safety. He was incredible in Columbia from day one, freshman All-American. He was the team's defensive MVP as a true freshman. He was also just one of 3 players with multiple pick sixes last year, so he's not just some downhill big safety that's going to drop into the box. No, he showcases a lot of ball skills, and I think that's what makes him, for a lot of people, the number 1 safety in this class. You can see his stats this past year for the Gamecocks. 88 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, tossing 4 interceptions as well. And in coverage, he was not a liability. Usually you think, all right, well, if you're really good at one thing, then the other thing has to be not so good. No, the other thing was pretty good for him. Quarterback rating of 37.1 when targeted, only gave up 200 yards. Now, he did not play more of that nickel role that we saw Starks do, so less opportunity for guys to have passes completed in his deep end of the safety department and have yards be counted against him. At the end, to summarize the whole safety conversation as to why and how the Falcons could go that route at pick 15, I'll say Falcons know the edge class is very deep this year. So if you think about it this way, and I'm not trying to defend them, but I'm trying to just play devil's advocate here, they could look at it as we can get a true Pro Bowl caliber safety in round 1 and get a good starting caliber defensive end in round 2, whereas if we flip those two, we might just get a good defensive end in round 1 and a not so great safety in round 2. That would be the thinking that I'd have to come up with for how we get a blindside Michael Penix type pick. But even those 2 safeties, I don't think would be to the same degree as Penix in terms of the number 1 storyline on draft night. Atlanta goes safety. I still believe they're going to go with a defensive end, a defensive lineman, a pass rusher, but if the top guys on their board all go 1 through 14, these are 2 names to watch for in terms of best player available type of mentality. Before we look at the other 3 players, quick plug here. We're going to do something brand new tomorrow on the channel. We're not going to go live when we usually do at 5 p.m. Eastern. We're going to go live a few hours earlier at 2 p.m. Eastern. And the reason being is the entire Chat Sports company is going to go live on all the different channels we have. And we're going to do a mock draft. We're going to do a 3-round mock draft. So I'll be making the picks for the Dirty Birds. And then we'll pass it off to whoever's next up on the clock at 16. I think that's the Bengals, whatever it is. So if you want to be, a part of that and see that happen in real time, join us tomorrow on Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 days before the draft, for a Chat Sports 3-round mock draft. Let's combo the next 2 as well because they play the same position. It is a pair of offensive tackles, Kelvin Banks and Josh Conerly. Now, this would be much more Michael Penix-esque territory of a blindside pick. I'm putting them, 3rd and 4th here because I feel like it is the least likely, so I don't want to spend too much airtime on least likely candidates. But then again, Penix also seemed very unlikely last year, and we saw what happened. But the reason why I highlight these 2 guys is we saw when the Falcons had some pre-draft visits come out, a few surprising names on the list, including some offensive tackles, Kelvin Banks, Josh Conerly. Now, some of these were visits where they came to the Falcons facility. Some of them are like private workouts, but still kind of the same, neighborhood of extra attention being given to some of these players. So a couple of offensive guys, but predominantly a lot of defensive guys. I'll just share the entire pre-draft visits list with you. We're not going to go through all the names, but I do want to zero in on those 2 offensive tackles that were taken or brought in for visits and held private workouts with, because it caught me off guard since Atlanta went to the Combine with this mentality that we're going to devote all of our resources to defense. And here they are looking at 2 tackles that are expected to go in round 1 and maybe early round 2. So could this be the curveball that everyone is kind of preparing for after Penix last year? Some background on Banks. We'll start with the Texas tackle. 6'5", 315. Good size altogether for an NFL starting tackle. Some people think he could make the switch to offensive guard due to a lack of ideal length. We'll see. I'm not an offensive lineman, and I don't get hung up in the quarter-inch details of an offensive lineman's arm length. He was a true freshman starter at left tackle, and he held down that side of the line of the fort for 3 years. So I'm inclined to believe he can continue to play
tackle at the next level, but some teams might view him better as a guard. So here's my hiccup with Banks. When the Texans played their two toughest games last year, in my opinion, Michigan and Georgia, at least in terms of toughest games for the offensive line, not his best work. 3 pressures, 1 sack allowed. Those aren't ginormous numbers. But when you compare those numbers to all the other games they played, I mean, Michigan, we're seeing 2 guys on their defensive line go round 1, round 2 in this draft, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, a couple of interior guys. And then you got Georgia with all their stud defenders. Those were the 2 worst games for Banks last year. And that's the round 1 prospect you want to go after? Not interested. Before we talk about the other offensive tackle that could be the blindside pick, quick shout out to Game Time. Game Time has an awesome deal for anyone wanting to go to a Braves game or any other sporting event in your area because they make getting tickets faster and easier, even for hard to get playoff seats. So unfortunately, Hawks RIP, but if you want to go to any other sporting event in your area, check out Game Time with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA playoff tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They also offer the Game Time guarantee. They can credit you 110% of the difference if you find the same tickets in the same row and section elsewhere for less. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Getting back to our offensive lineman, Josh Conerly, 6'4", 311, so a little bit smaller than Banks, but they're both, massive human beings. He only started 2 years for the Ducks, starting his sophomore season. Now, he is kind of looked at as a rough around the edges type prospect. Someone that needs some work and needs some coaching to be done, not looked at as, hey, that's a guy we can take and he can start day 1 for us at left tackle. There are going to be more growing pains with Conerly. He is the quintessential kind of high ceiling with all the, flashes we see and the traits and the fundamentals at times, but a bit of a low floor as well, given he kind of feels a little bit raw to the position. Raw is not the right word to use, but just not quite as refined, how about that, as some other tackles. I'm just going to repeat this once more for everyone in the back. Hard no on taking a tackle in round 1. It's not a very good tackle class. I can see the thought process behind take Michael Penix. He's a lefty. Caleb McGarry is now your blindside, tackle. He's more of a run protector versus a pass protector. So invest in your investment and make sure Penix stays healthy given his injury history in college. I follow all that, and I don't say you're wrong for that. But this is not the year to go after a tackle in round 1. Unless you're getting Will Campbell or Armand Membu, who are not going to escape the top 10 most likely. No. Banks and Conerly, to me, they are round 2, round 3 type guys compared to previous offensive tackle classes. So if you wanted to go out and build up an offensive line or specifically a new tackle on the blind side for Penix, bad news for you. Not the year to do it. So if you're not going to force a defensive end, because some of the top prospects are already taken at that position, then don't force an offensive tackle who is no better than some of the other defensive ends available at 15. Do you track with me? Do you follow? This is just not the year to force an offensive tackle pick. If it was a loaded offensive tackle class, okay, I can kind of understand it a little bit. But I don't view any of these guys as upgrades to what you have right now in McGarry. Before we look at the 5th and final wild card draft target, quick reminder to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Leading up to the NFL draft, we're going to put our, foot to the pedal here and get you guys as much free draft content. So don't miss anything for your favorite team. Plus, we will be live for next Thursday and Friday of the NFL draft. So don't miss a single thing when it comes to pick analysis, breakdowns, and all 100% commercial free. Fifth and final wild card candidate, I'm going to go with another Texas Longhorn, Matthew Golden. I put him last because he would definitely be the biggest surprise of the bunch. If I had to rank them in order of surprises, it would probably go from least surprising, Malakai Starks, to most surprising, Matthew Golden. Now, the reason why he's even on this list is the guy has seen a tremendous rise in stock since the end of the season. On the left, I included some of the initial big boards and top 100s, top 50s that the big NFL draft gurus published back at the very beginning of the pre-draft process. Brugler, one of my favorites, and I've used his stuff a lot to put together these draft profiles on screen. He ranked 27th back then. Most recently, this month of April, shot up 12 spots, 15. January, Mel Kiper didn't even have him in his top 25. Now he's 15. Daniel Jeremiah from 22 to 16. Matt Miller is the only one that's consistent, but it's still a slight bump going from 17 to 16. So you have seen a very big rise for the Texas Longhorn. And I wonder if the Falcons get to a point in the draft where if those top four guys we talked about at the very beginning of the show, Mike Green, Jalen Walker, if all those players are taken and Atlanta wants to stick by best player available, a lot of people think at 15, if you just go purely off the big board, Golden could be one of the best players available. I mean, let's just take Dane Brugler's big board, for example, here, okay? And if everyone loves to say best player available, and I'm with you, I put that on my tombstone, but there has to be, some type of flexibility with it. Would you go best player available for a quarterback? Probably not. But what if Shedeur Sanders is the best player available? You know what I mean? So that's where you got to have some type of wiggle room. So let's just say all top 10 players on screen right here are taken before 15. That does not seem like a stretch. Maybe Shamir Stewart falls to 15. But let's just say all 10 are gone. Well, you look at 11 through 20 here. And if we're going best player available, Matthew Golden at 15 could be the best guy available. So then ask yourself, do you want an edge rusher like Mykel Williams, who comes in more in the 20s or 30s for some people, or BPA, number 15 Golden? And that's the Michael Penix scenario here, where Atlanta goes, we feel like Golden's just too good of a player, despite the lack of need we have at receiver. We can't pass on someone that we project to be an 8 to 10 year starter in the NFL. So where would Golden fit? If we peek at the receiver room for a moment, I think he could actually complement London and Mooney well. Drake London's ex-receiver, right? He's going to play the boundary. We know that now. Darnell Mooney, I think, had a ton of success in year one with the Falcons because they didn't force him in the slot like the Bears did. So keep Mooney out wide as well. I think Golden could be your Ray McCloud replacement after 2025, where you use him at the Z spot, where that means you can put him in the backfield from time to time, you can stick him in the slot, you can put him in motion a lot. That's something that the Falcons wanted to get involved. Like, what game was it last year? Someone help me out. When they put London in motion on like 3rd and 1 and they handed off to him on the end around and he didn't get the first down and did it twice in the same game and it kind of cost him the game more or less. Someone's yelling at their screen right now. You know what I'm talking about? That's a role where Golden would actually thrive in, I believe. So as ridiculous as it might sound for the Falcons to go with a receiver, if they feel that, hey, there's no defender at this point that's going to dramatically change our defense. So if our defense is still not going to be all that great, like if we go from C- to C, how much are we really improving? Versus if we bring Golden in, well, if we're going to give up 30 points on defense every single week, we better score 31. And he could be a big part of us getting to 31 points. So who is your favorite non-edge rusher pick? I know that is the number one position of need, and I think it's going to be Mike Green, but if he does go before 15, who do you want the Falcons to go after that's not an edge rusher? For me, I'd go with Nick Emmanwori. I don't want them to go after an offensive tackle. And between the two safeties, I like Emmanwori over Starks. So as much as a Golden fan I am, because I do think he is the best receiver in this class, I still can't just completely ignore the defense. And Atlanta's just made so many investments on offense in the draft as of late. They got to bring in a defender. So give me Nick Emmanwori, and you can pair him up with Jesse Bates and A.J. Terrell for years to come, and that'd be a really fun secondary.